One of the reasons why so many students struggle with the IELTS speaking section is that they don't fully understand what the examiners are looking for in order to achieve a high score. Some use too much slang and filler words. Others make their answers too complicated by using formal cohesive devices and vocabulary. There are also those who think that using idiomatic language means including an idiom in every sentence they say. I've seen test takers who don't elaborate enough on their ideas, especially in part 3, and those who give too much detail in part 1. Let me know in the comments if you do any of these, by the way. The problem is that none of these things will allow you to score higher than a 6 or 6.5. If you want to get a higher score, your first step should be to get a very clear understanding of what is expected of you. That's why today I've decided to give you not only tips on how to do better on the IELTS speaking section, but also to highlight the essential aspects that you need to keep in mind in order to score 7+ on the IELTS speaking section. We'll start with a brief introduction to the IELTS speaking section, where I'll remind you what this part of the test looks like. Then, we'll analyze what the examiners expect from you on test day and look at strategies and techniques for scoring high. The IELTS speaking section is divided into 3 parts. In part 1, you'll be asked questions on 2 different topics related to your life. In part 2, you'll have 1 to 2 minutes to speak on a given topic. Part 3 lasts 4 to 5 minutes and contains more questions related to the main topic of part 2. You'll have to give longer answers, often up to 1 minute or more, with more elaboration. As you can see, the 2 speaking formats in which you need to excel are the interview and the monologue. This means that you should be good at creating effective 1 to 2 minute speeches and answering questions in a precise and natural way. If you want your speaking and writing to be assessed, you can join our IELTS preparation course, and I will tell you what you need to do to get a high score. The promo code link is in the description below. Now, sounding natural is the very first thing I want us to focus on. As you probably all know by now, in order to get a high score on the IELTS speaking test, you should sound natural. But what does that mean? Well, you obviously don't want to be too formal. For example, you don't want to use formal linking words like furthermore, to exemplify, hence, and so on. You also don't want to sound too mechanical, like a robot, especially like a very scared robot that is afraid of making the slightest mistake, and when it does, it's so scared that it cannot say a word or starts stuttering uncontrollably. However, I have noticed that when I tell this to my students, I often get super informal responses, full of slang and filler words. So while you need to sound natural and not too formal, using slang and too many filler words will hurt your score. What about filler words, you may ask? Should I use them in my responses or not? Well, if you just sprinkle a few relevant filler words into your answers to fill in the gaps while you think, that's totally fine. For example, adding words like, well, like, actually, seriously, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, clearly is possible, but in very small doses. If you feel like you're overusing them, which a lot of students do, you should try to avoid them. Saying like 20 times in an answer will only lower your score. However, you can definitely use filler words, or even better, time-consuming phrases that give you some time to think about the question. This will ensure that you don't pause or hesitate too much. Even if the question is challenging and you don't know what to say, keep talking rather than panicking or staying silent for too long. For example, you can say, "That's a difficult question. Let me think about it." "That's an interesting question. I haven't thought about it before. It's been so long since I thought about it, but my guess would be that." You can also correct yourself when you make a mistake. You can say, "What I mean is that." What I actually meant was, what I'm trying to say is that. So, tip number 1, control your language. Avoid being too formal or too informal. Don't use slang or formal cohesive devices. Also, don't use too many filler words. Record yourself answering questions and giving monologues and then listen to them. If you hear too many filler words, cut them out. Then answer the same question again and try to control your speech. Also, try to avoid saying and ah. If you do it once, there is nothing wrong with it. But if you have too many of these sounds, your fluency score will be lowered. This is why our tip number 2 is to generate ideas for IELTS speaking topics. Most of the time, we need filler words and ums when we have nothing to say. For example, you're asked to give a monologue about your favorite perfume. Let's say you've never used perfume in your life. Would it be easy for you to start talking fluently about this topic on the spot? Will you be able to minimize pauses and hesitations? I don't think so. But if you prepare in advance and brainstorm ideas, you'll feel much more confident and you'll certainly score higher. To practice, take 2 to 3 recent IELTS speaking topics every day and try to answer them. If the question is easy, just skim it and move on to the next one. However, if the question is challenging, take your time to think about what you can say. This will make you much better prepared for test day. You might think that native speakers use filler words and ums all the time. If I have to sound like a native speaker, why can't I do the same? Thing is, the IELTS speaking test is not about being as fluent as a native speaker. Many native speakers can ace the test on their first try and don't score higher than a 7. If you want to reach the top, like a band 9, you should speak like a person who has been educated to graduate level at a university where English is the language of study. You can watch university students and graduates answer questions on random topics. There are many such interviews on YouTube. For example, let's look at one of them.
Degrees from universities like Oxford do is give you sort of that rubber stamp approval on your CV to tell corporations that you are like one of them.
We actually need more people with vocational skills. People who are doing medicine here, they're going to make like £12 an hour. Plumbers, they make so much money because we don't have enough plumbers.
Given my degree, even if I went into a job, I don't think I would be able to pay it off quickly enough.
As you can see, they had some fillers in their answers, but not too many. So again, using fillers now and then is perfectly normal and won't hurt your score. But if you overdo it and disturb the flow of your ideas, it will lower your score, especially in the fluency and coherence part. Which brings us to tip number 3. If you want to score 8, 8.5 or 9 on the IELTS speaking section, you need to take your speaking skills to another level. So make sure you expose yourself to as much correct and fine English as possible. The best way to do this is to watch videos and podcasts. Podcasts will help you prepare for answering parts 1 and 3 because they show how people answer questions naturally. Watching videos gives you a better idea of ideal fluency and speaking speed. So be sure to watch some to prepare for part 2. Some good podcasts and videos I would suggest are 1. Ali Abdal's YouTube channel and his Deep Dive podcast. Ali is a Cambridge graduate and he covers a lot of interesting topics on his channels. He has an amazing vocabulary and varied grammar, so it's a great pleasure to listen to him. What I love about the vocabulary he uses is that it's exactly what you need for the IELTS speaking test. Not too formal, but not too informal either. As you watch a video or podcast, write down 5 to 10 new words and then try to summarize what you've learned using those words. For example, while watching this video, I wrote down something like this: genuinely, life-changing skills, in our side hustle, to be fully present. We are bombarded by distractions, endless options, incredibly important to cultivate the ability to focus over the years, is directly proportional to, I was burning the midnight oil, I was feeling really overwhelmed, doing an extra degree, and that's just from watching the first minute and a half of the video. You can also check out the podcast Rise Life Stories of Accomplished Individuals, hosted by Gary Lipovetsky, who is an entrepreneur and business owner. In the podcast, Gary digs deep into the lives of interesting people, uncovering the challenges they faced along the way and extracting their knowledge and expertise. Again, I love the language used by both the host and the guests. I think you can learn a lot of vocabulary that will help you to improve your IELTS score for any section. I especially like the topic-specific vocabulary you can get from each podcast. Two other channels I'd recommend are Unjaded Jade and Ruby Granger. The girls are also amazing. Their speaking skills are very good, and if you listen to them long enough, you'll soon find yourself using many of the expressions and phrases they use in their videos. Working on expanding your vocabulary in this way will ensure you can use it with full flexibility and precision in all areas. Tip number 5, don't learn lists of words for each speaking topic. You probably think this is something you should do as you go through the IELTS speaking questions. Instead, what I often see from my students in our one-on-one sessions is that when they try to forcefully add certain words to their answers, they end up losing their fluency and make mistakes. So one thing you should do is expand your vocabulary in general by watching videos and podcasts and exposing yourself to as much quality English as possible. Another thing is to go through the typical and latest IELTS speaking question types. When you do this, just think about the answer you'd give in your native language and look up the words you might be missing. That's it. Tip number 6. Don't force too many idioms and phrasal verbs into your answers. Let's listen carefully to a small clip from Ruby's video to get an idea of what I'm talking about.
And the streets were looking beautiful. Honestly, I've missed Oxford so much. I can't tell you how much I've missed the city. And that's also coming as somebody who really does not like cities. I never imagined myself being excited to go back to a city.
Hello, it's Ruby and good morning. I'm back in Oxford now for Hilary term, which is the second term. And I went to the library this morning just to do some personal reading and journaling. Grabbed a coffee. Yes, I am mad because it's an iced Americano, but I really just prefer iced coffee.
This was a perfect example of using idiomatic vocabulary. As you can see, she didn't bombard us with idioms or phrasal verbs in every sentence. In fact, idiomatic language is natural in expression and correct without being too formal. So one more reason to commit to quality English is to sound idiomatic without too many idioms. Actually, idiomatic vocabulary really helps in the speaking section because it allows you to get the same message across in a faster and more natural way. For example, what's the word we use to describe something that really annoys us? We use the word pet peeve. Smoking is one of my pet peeves. I hate it when people smoke around me. Another example is a soft-spoken person. That's the person who has a quiet or gentle voice. Some people have a loud voice, some people have a soft voice, and these people are soft-spoken. Tip number 7, avoid saying a lot in part 1, but elaborate more on your ideas in part 3. While in part 1, you should only give a few sentences in response. In part 3, you should include many examples and explanations. Part 3 of the IELTS speaking is specifically designed to provide you with the opportunity to discuss topics related to part 2 in much greater depth. This part of the test focuses on your ability to express and justify opinions, and to analyze, discuss, and speculate about issues. The examiner will help you do this by asking you questions that explore the topic area in more depth. If you do not expand on the questions in part 3, the examiner may think that your vocabulary is limited. So, be prepared for the examiner to encourage you to keep talking and see how much you can explore the topic. Let's review briefly before moving on to the next few tips. To get a high score for fluency and coherence, you should speak fluently with only rare repetition or self-correction. Make only content-related hesitations. rather than to find words or grammar. Speak coherently with fully appropriate, cohesive features. Develop topics fully and appropriately. For lexical resource, make sure you use vocabulary with full flexibility and precision in all topics. Use idiomatic language naturally and accurately. As you may have guessed, these are the criteria that IELTS examiners use to assess your performance. There are actually 4 such criteria: fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. For grammatical range and accuracy, you should use a full range of structures naturally and appropriately, and produce consistently accurate structures apart from slips. So tip 8 is to use different grammar structures in your answers. Now, the important thing is not only to use a variety of grammar structures, but also to use them naturally and appropriately. According to IDP IELTS, it's important that you can match the grammar structure with the appropriate function. For example, if you're describing the situation in your country, you can use present, perfect, and past tenses. When thinking about the future, you should consider introducing conditionals, future tenses, and modal verbs, such as may, might, should, could, and so on. This brings us to tip number 9. Drill grammar. To make any grammatical construction sound natural, you should make it an integral part of your speech. This means that you should first drill the forms, and then learn and practice ways to use that construction successfully. What I do with my IELTS students is that I carefully observe their speech, note their weaknesses and the constructions they should adopt, and then we repeat each construction over and over again until it becomes so ingrained in their minds that they start using it without thinking, just like they do in their native language. Listening to podcasts and audiobooks in English also helps a lot, because you can start using some correct grammar structures automatically, because you've heard them a lot. Finally, the last criterion is pronunciation. You should be able to use a full range of pronunciation features with precision and subtlety, sustain flexible use of features throughout, and be effortless to understand. The best way to achieve all this is to use the shadowing technique. You can use the Deep English website, where you can listen and repeat, imitating the speaker's intonation, pronunciation, and pitch. Well, that brings us to the end of today's lesson. I hope this video was helpful, answered some of your questions about the speaking section of the IELTS, and made the big picture a little clearer for you. Please let me know in the comments below what score you want to achieve and when you want to take the test. Remember, achieving a high score on the IELTS exam is not an impossible feat. With dedication, perseverance, and strategic preparation, you can achieve your goal. Keep practicing, stay focused, and believe in yourself. If you want your speaking and writing to be assessed, you can join our IELTS preparation course, and I will tell you what you need to do to get a high score. The promo code link is in the description below. Thanks for watching and good luck on your IELTS journey.